What's up, membershipers? You're listening to the Membership Geeks podcast. I'm your host, Mike Morrison, founder of the Membership Geeks, and your host for the number one place to be for proven, practical tips and advice on growing a successful membership business. If you've just discovered the show, congratulations, you found us. This is one you're going to want to subscribe to. I'm a little bit biased, but we've got 400 plus episodes of just gold nuggets for every stage of running a membership business, whether you're planning to start a membership and you're still trying to flesh your idea out, or whether you've been up and running for years and you're looking for new ideas on sales, retention, engagement, or just scaling the day-to-day operations. We have got a treasure trove of awesome membership advice for you. So if you are new to the show, make sure you hit subscribe. If you are a long-term listener, you know that I love and appreciate all of your continued support and for continuing to lend me your ears every other week as I dispense my membership wisdom. All right. Speaking of wisdom, today's a very special episode. I'm joined by Teresa Heath-Wareing, who is an online marketing maven who's been in this game for a long time. She knows it inside and out, and she is my go-to person for strategic advice on webinars and on basically anything that involves whipping up attention and making use of that attention, capitalizing on that attention. So, Teresa works with entrepreneurs, with course creators, with membership owners to help them with launch promotions and with running things like campaigns such as webinars, challenges, and so on. And Teresa will actually be speaking on stage at Retain Live 2025. That is how highly I rate her and the advice she has to share and the experience she has in getting people real results from their membership marketing. So there was nobody else I would want to bring on the show to talk all about how to use webinars in your membership marketing strategy. So despite me being in the online world for a couple of decades now, webinars are not something that I've been using consistently for myself, for promoting geeks, for promoting the academy. Certainly something that we used a lot with clients. It's something that a lot of people within our academy community are using effectively. But personally, there's always that thing, you have that term of cobbler's shoes, right? Even though I've long since advised webinars are something that can be a key component to your marketing, actually sometimes taking your own advice, you don't always do it the way that you should. And I've definitely been guilty of that. We've not really capitalized on webinars for most of the time that we've been running Geeks and the Academy. However, last year we started doubling down on them and they've made a major impact. Now, I'm not an expert on webinar strategy. They work extremely well for us. However, I want to bring Teresa on the show, not just to pick her brains for my own benefit, which is always a nice little side effect of having fantastic guests, but to get her to share some of her wisdom, insights, and practical tips and tactics on how you could be utilizing webinars to drive more membership sales. So, without any further ado, I'm going to jump in to my conversation with Teresa Heath-Wareing. You're going to want to pay attention and get out a notepad for this one because she delivers a heck of a lot of value if you're thinking of using webinars for your membership. So here we go with my conversation with Teresa Heath-Wareing. Okay, so I am joined today by Teresa Heath-Wareing. She is an international best-selling author, award-winning speaker, TEDx speaker, podcaster of a number one rated podcast, and of course an online business owner. She is a marketing maven and a business growth whiz who works with online business owners, course creators, membership owners, and coaches to help them grow their online business to 6 and 7 figures. And she's someone I am very excited to have taking the stage at Retain Live 2025 this September. Teresa, welcome to the Membership Geeks podcast.
Thank you for having me. And I am very excited to speak at Retain. Very excited.
Oh, it's going to be great. I mean, I'm just excited in general and buzzing. And then I remember all the fantastic speakers. And I remember I get to sit and watch and listen and learn with everyone else in the room.
So cool.
So cool.
So cool.
All right, so today we're going to talk about using webinars to market, to launch, to grow your membership business. Now, I've got to confess that I've been doing this for 15, 20 years, however long it is. That's depressing to say. Um, I didn't start consistently doing webinars until last year. I did one live webinar. I did a couple of evergreen ones, but I did one live webinar for a business before Membership Geeks back in 2013. I had one attendee actually show up. It was Laura Pearman, who we both
I
know.
love that you remember
Yes,
like who it was.
it was Laura Pearman, and God bless her, she persevered when a power cut hit in the middle of my webinar. So I'm here to learn as much from you as our listeners will be on how to use webinars to market your membership. So I suppose to start off with, what are the key ingredients that make a webinar effective for attracting and converting people to your membership?
So first off, can I just say I love the fact that you shared that you did a webinar with one person turning up, because I think sometimes when people look at like other people who do webinars, we see the hundreds of people turn up and we're like, we want that. That's what we need. And actually, it's like, in reality, I have been there and done that with one person turning up as well. So
Yeah.
just be reassured that if you're listening to this and if you haven't done a webinar, that like, what if only one person does that? We've been there, we've done it. Give them the best webinar they've ever had in their life, by the way. And also tech fails, we can't help that. So for me, I guess the first thing to say is that webinars still work. I know lots of people who have been in the online space for a while think, oh, aren't we over that already? Doesn't everyone know what a webinar is all about? And the truth is, yeah, they might know what webinars are about, but they're still so effective. And the reason they're so effective is they are a great way for you to connect with your audience. They are fairly short and succinct. So when you think about other ways in which to launch your membership, there might be a boot camp or a challenge, or I've done open houses. They tend to be longer and need a bigger investment. Whereas actually we are so time poor that I want you to come along, get some content from me, get some actions from me and be like, great, brilliant. And if you like what you hear and you see, then great, there'll be something offered at the end. So for me, I think the kind of key ingredients are that you have a webinar that, and I keep talking about sexy titles, but I mean it, like someone needs to look at that title and go, I need that. Like, I need that in my life. I need to know that thing. And I think lots of people get that wrong. They just kind of go, come to my training about bananas. And it's like, no, what are you going to tell me about bananas? Like, why do I need to go to it? So it's about kind of going, what is the pain that they are dealing with right now? So for instance, as we record this, and obviously probably this will be out after I've done this thing, but I'm doing a webinar, and one of the subtexts of the webinar is what's working in 2025. So it's like anybody launching is hopefully going to go, oh no, I need to know what's working in 2025. So it's about getting a really good, sexy title that's going to make people go, I want to come along and I want to listen to what you've got to say. And then it's about, and we can talk about this in more detail, but it's about creating a webinar that helps convert your watcher into a buyer. And I think that's sometimes people get that confused. I think sometimes they think I'm doing a training and they do a brilliant training, but they don't convert them. Whereas a webinar is very different to a training.
And in terms of people not necessarily wrapping their heads around that difference, do you think that's something from inexperience? Do you think it's something that comes from fear of selling? Because again, this is something that when I started doing webinars a little more, that transition from, okay, this is the bit where I'm teaching. Okay, now comes the pitch. And they know that now comes the pitch. And they know that even though I'm segueing, they know it's a segue.
Yeah.
Does that tend to be the root of it? And how do you get around that? How do you get comfortable with that?
That I think is totally what happens. People see it as two different things, as in they see the first half or the first 45 minutes as teaching and giving them something and giving them content. And then they see the selling bit as a completely separate bit. Well, the truth is, the whole webinar from start to finish is designed and structured to sell. Now, it's not to say that someone shouldn't get value out of it. And I'm really keen on that. And I am very passionate about saying to anybody on a webinar with me, I want you to walk away and think, Teresa's ace. And I learned some really cool stuff. Whether you decide to work with me or not,
Yeah.
I still want you to think I haven't wasted your time, because I would hate to do that. So, yes, I still add value, but literally, almost from the point you start the webinar, you are selling inadvertently. And I think that's the thing. I think if you see it as two separate things, that's where it's like a bait and switch. That's where it's
Mm.
like, hey, everybody, I'm going to teach all this thing, boom, buy my stuff. That
Yeah.
does not work for you or anybody else. Whereas if you set it up right at the beginning and you go through a structure, then you're basically selling right into it and your audience are ready for it.
Yeah, I always like to think of any sort of long form content, or I suppose any content you put out there, as it's your opportunity to show that you can solve some small problems,
Yeah.
so that when you start talking about the bigger problems, you've got that credibility and you've got that track record. And so I suppose that sexy webinar topic, by focusing on actually, yeah, someone could leave it and never buy from you, but they've had a problem solved. And if they're kind of trying to think in the future, okay, I've got these other problems. Who do I know who fixes problems with, you know, fly fishing? Who do I know who fixes problems with my golf game? Who's done that for me before? You're already there in their head.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a few different aims of a webinar, and I think one of them is to totally help them with something. And I am very keen to go, here are some actionable things that you can do. The other part, and I think people get worried about being sleazy and salesy. And I think what I would say to that is, if you are even concerned that you might be that, you're not. Okay. Because the true sleazy salesy people are not sat there going, oh, is this sleazy? They're just sleazy. So the
Yeah.
fact that you're even thinking it means you're not, and therefore you're probably not going to deliver it in a way that comes across as sleazy or salesy. But for instance, one of the things that we need to help people understand and address is that they're still in the problem. Okay. So yes, you're coming along to a webinar. The one I'm doing is about launching and is about, I think the title is 3 reasons your last launch flopped and how to fix them. What's working in 2025. So hopefully sexy enough to make people go, oh, okay. But so I'm going to tell them the 3 reasons and the 3 things that people get wrong, and I'm going to give them some action. But what I'm also going to say is, you are still in the problem. You have done all this stuff, and a lot of my audience, and probably a lot of your audience, have done a lot of research. They've bought a few little courses. They've watched some things. They haven't fixed the problem. They still have the problem. So it's about reminding them that you wouldn't be sat on a webinar if you didn't still have the problem. So yes, I'm going to help you with some things, but you still have that problem, and therefore I am a solution to that problem. And I think that's one thing that people miss, of kind of having that conversation of, you are still there. So actually you need to do something different. You've done what you've done to here has got you to here. Now we need to change it. And that change might be working with me. That change might be having the guts to finally go and do the thing. Whatever it is, you have got to change something. And then I think the other thing that people, for me, if like people just take one thing from this and change this one thing in their webinar, my work is done. No one puts enough case studies in. Like no one. So because of what I do and how I teach and how I work with clients, I review people's webinars, presentations a lot. And I don't know how many times I have to tell them, I need another case study. I need another testimonial. I need more proof. And it's that proof. We need to show people that we can do the thing we say we're going to do. So it's like, here's a problem. Here's how to fix it. Here's someone who did what I said, and this is the result they got. Next problem. Here's a problem. Here's how to fix it. Here's someone who did what I said and got the result. And we need to be backing everything up with, this person did this. This person did this. This person did this. And it doesn't have to be, because I know what some people might think, like you've all been on webinars where, and believe me, I've been on them too, where someone's like, they had a list of 5 people and no social media, and they sold one thing and they made $60 million. Like, really? So they don't even have to be massive wild claims like that. One of the testimonials I show in my presentations is a lovely lady that I work with called Kristen, who is a gluten-free coach. And she is doing webinars to sell her product, her course. And her first 3 webinars that she did before she worked with me, she had like 5 or 6 signups and no one turned up live to every single one of them. And then she did a webinar with me and she had something like 70 something signups and 20 something people turned up. Like that is a massive win. Yeah, it's not millions, but it's like that's more realistic of a win for most people than maybe they had 5 people on a list and they made 60 million. So it don't think I haven't made massive dramatic shifts in people's lives or they haven't earned millions. It doesn't even have to be about that. It just needs to prove the points that you're saying. This is a problem. This is how you fix it. This is someone who did what I said and the result that they got.
Yeah, and I think those huge, hey, look, they had absolutely nothing. They could barely tie their shoelaces, and now look at them. Yeah. They're so far removed from where most people are.
Yeah.
Even if they're true.
You can't resonate with it.
Yeah. Even if they are true, it's usually the outliers and you're not getting the full story. And I always think with those as kind of being in the audience side of things, as kind of like, they can be inspirational, they can be motivational, but they're not relatable. And I think the kind of people those big, audacious claims attract are the people who are attracted to big, shiny objects, the people who are attracted to, these dreams of being a multimillionaire from nothing. Yeah. And for a membership owner in particular, those are not the kind of people who stick around.
No.
Definitely.
No. And I think that's such a good point in terms of, how you're showing up and the type of people you're attracting and like I said, the results you're showing. And funnily enough, when I showed Kristen's results in another webinar I've done or something else I did, someone actually put, oh, thank God, like, this is great. This is so realistic of like, she started and it wasn't working and I helped her and it started working. Like she's not suddenly jumping to millions, but there was a shift and a change. And the other thing is those people want the magic bullet and there isn't one.
Exactly.
Like, I'm really sorry. I wish there was. Because if there was, I would have it and I would use it on me, but there isn't one. And I think, again, those more realistic those more realistic testimonials and case studies prove that point of just someone making a shift and going to the next step.
Definitely. And so we've talked about how Kristen wasn't getting people turning up to webinars initially. We've talked about how both of us have had those private webinars, essentially. That's
lucky for those people.
Exactly, right. That is absolutely something I think people struggle with, especially if they're using webinars to try and build that audience and you have a little bit of that chicken and egg situation where you maybe don't have enough reach to populate a webinar and all of that. How can people move the needle in that area? What are the most effective strategies for getting people to register and getting them to actually show up?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you talked about this because I would love to give you some numbers if I can.
Go for it.
Because one of the things that I see all the time is because I am like obsessed. I literally go through people's content just for fun and watch webinars and I know I need to get out more. But I will get so many of my students and so many of my clients coming to me going, it wasn't very good. And I'll go, okay, give me your numbers. And the truth is it was bang on right. Okay, so let's start with your list size. So let's say you've got a list size of 1,000 people, just to make the numbers easy. So roughly, because you have a list and then you have a launch list, okay? So your launch list is the number of people who signed up to do your webinar. So roughly between 15 and 30% of your list will sign up and become your launch list. Okay, so those are people who have said, yes, I want to watch your webinar. So that's the first thing to keep an eye on. So depending on the size of your list, let's be realistic. If you've got 1,000 people and 15% sign up, that's 150 people sign up. So I want people to understand that first because the grow bit is really important because it's a numbers game. Then from your launch list to your engagement, i.e. so people who sign up to the people who turn up, and we want them to turn up because people who turn up are much more engaged. They get let's be honest, how many times have you signed up for something thinking, oh, I can't watch it, I'll watch it again, and you just don't watch it. So we want them to turn up and there's lots of strategies we can do to do that. But normally from your launch list, between 20 and 40% of people will turn up. So again, we often think if I got 100 signups, I'm going to have 100 people on the webinar. No. You're going to have between 20 and 40 people on the webinar. Then, on average, between 1 and 8%, 8% is good, between 1 and 8% of your launch list will buy from you. Okay, so I got this in a presentation, and like I said, this stuff I geek out on. So let's say you're going to sell a product for £997. I've just obviously picked one figure. So let's say that's an annual membership. And you've got a launch list and 1,000. And let's go on the lower end, because I want you to see how wildly different this can be. So on the lower end at 15%, that means you've got 150 people on your launch list. If you had a 20% turn up rate, the lower end, that means about 30 people are going to turn up. And if you had a lower end, and I've actually done 2% because 1% would have just been one. So 2%, 2 sales, which means you've made £1,994. Okay. Now, let's say, and one of my jobs when I help people is to help them tweak to improve these numbers. Let's say you're on the higher end of this kind of percentage. So your launch list is still 1,000. We haven't changed that. And 30%, because I said it's between 15 and 30% sign up for your webinar, which means suddenly now 300 people have signed up for your webinar. Then let's say you get a 40% turn up rate. Well, that's now suddenly 120 people who have turned up for your webinar. And then let's say you get an 8% sales rate, which means you get 24 sales. Now you're suddenly making £23,000. So when you see these massive launches and these massive webinars and these massive things, and I've had the privilege of working with some big audiences and seeing behind the scenes of some massive launches, their numbers are exactly the same. In fact, if anything, their percentages are on the lower side because it tends to be smaller audiences that get the higher percentages. You, as someone looking at it, you're going, oh my God, look at how many people they've got. But they've got a massive audience. So normally the percentages are about right. So I know I kind of digressed into talking about this, but hopefully it's helpful. But like when we talk about getting that engagement, getting those people, we need that launch, we need that list to be good for starters, or, we want that list. Again, if you've done your first webinar, the chances are you might even get a higher percentage than 30% sign up. If it's a new thing that you've offered to your list and it's a fairly new list, then you might get a really good percentage sign up for your webinar. So in terms of promoting the webinar, you need to be like poop in a field. I keep saying it all the time. You need to be everywhere. So for the 2 weeks prior to your webinar, you don't mention your membership at all, or this is how I teach it. You only talk about the webinar. Everything leads to the webinar. So for 2 solid weeks, maybe even a little bit more if you've got time. And before that, there's something called pre-launch content. But for those 2 weeks, the only thing you talk about is the webinar. Everything. Sign up for the webinar, join the webinar. You'll find this on the webinar. You'll do this on the webinar. I'm currently writing all of my webinar emails to get them to sign up because I'm just at the beginning of in fact, it's 2 weeks today. And there will be in total something about 17 emails in the next 2 weeks.
Wow.
Right. I do not normally send that number of emails, but it is like, come and join the webinar. Every single social media post will lead back to the webinar. The chatbot, sign up for the webinar. So everything you talk about, my podcast will have a ad on it, join the webinar. So everything you do, then the other thing that you need to do almost simultaneously is once someone's signed up, we need to encourage them to turn up. And this is where people miss this bit. And that bit's crucial because we want them to turn up because most of those sales are going to come from people who have turned up. So I will send probably 6 emails to the people that have signed up to get them to turn up. And it will be telling them reasons why they want to turn up. So let's say, one of my emails that I wrote yesterday to get people to come and sign up for the webinar was about pre-launch content because I'm going to be talking about it and how important it is. So I will still have that in one of my emails to people who have already signed up, but I'll be saying, instead of saying sign up for the webinar because I talk about pre-launch content and it's really important, I'll go, on the webinar that you're coming to, I talk about pre-launch content and it's going to be a game changer. So you can almost mirror your emails a little bit, but you want to be sending those emails to get people to turn up. And then you want to be doing things like have a workbook. There is actually some psychological thing about when someone has something physical, they instantly believe there's more higher value in it. Even though it's a webinar and it's free and that workbook was free and they printed it, having it on their desk is a constant reminder. Like having a workbook, having a bonus for people who turn up live in your emails, tell them there's going to be a bonus for people who turn up live. So we want to be doing it as much as possible. We want the day before, the hour before, we're just starting, like all of those emails.
Mm.
And that, like I said, that in itself is a beast just to get them. And at this point, we haven't even talked about selling the membership at all.
But I mean, that, again, like you say, those numbers, it just illustrates just the knock-on effect of if you're just a little bit better at getting your list interested in the webinar and just a little bit better at getting them to turn up, then you just have this build, this accumulation of how that then impacts what comes out at the end. And it's like with regular funnels. And I think part of the mistake, and maybe it comes from how webinars have been taught before, is they're almost taught in isolation. And they're not given the context that is needed to set expectations, but also to make people realize it isn't just something you put in your diary that you're doing for a couple of hours in a few weeks' time. And I'll bash out a few emails this week and we'll see how it goes from there. Like, you could have the best webinar in the world, but if no one comes to it, as we both had in the past, then
and literally your title could put people off or not get people to sign up. Your emails might not attract people in the right way. Your turn up emails, your social media, your whatever it might be. And like you said, this is why I geek out on the numbers so much, because my job is to get someone to take action, because once we have you take action, we have a starting point. Because this is the other thing, and you will know this like as well as I do, if not better. You have so many memberships in different industries with different people talking about different things, teaching different things, and the differences are wildly different. So you can't compare the launch of one membership to the launch of another membership, because they're just not comparable. They're two completely different things. So what I need people to do when they work with me, or if you're listening to this, take some action, make those notes, work out where you're at, and then how can we make this better? So I was working with someone who's just done, they've just done a slightly different launch. They did like a 3-video launch, and she came to me with the results, and she was like, I'm not overly happy with the results and they weren't great. And she was like, but I didn't try very hard. And I'm like, okay, but that's fine, right? Because now we know at this level of effort, she didn't send many emails. She didn't do loads of social media. Like, at this level of effort, this is what you can expect. So what if next time we have a bit more effort? Let's see if we can then get more results. Or what if we can get, so again, this is the other thing that talking to someone like Micah, I think is really helpful. So her audience was a really cold audience. So she had done something through chatbots and had advertised it, and it was a cold audience, and therefore her turn up rate was really low. Well, that would make sense. It's a cold audience. So again, just having that kind of, if you look at it and go, well, that should be between 20 and 40%, and actually it's 18%. Well, if that 18% is a cold audience, I'd be all right with that. Like, I'd go, well done, awesome, great. So it's understanding the nuances of it all to then go whether it was a success or not. And I think sometimes we just look at it and go, we've all been there and we've all seen the webinars where they're in a room and they've got all the screens. I mean, one day, Mike, one day, right? We've all seen it. Like, no, that's not, like, Mike and I sit at our computer, we drink our coffee, we make sure we got our presentation right. And then I literally hit go on Zoom and I go, hi, everyone. And it's really not like the big screen stuff. I wish it was sometimes. But
honestly, that's the biggest disappointment. All those early 2000s movies where they would show like anyone involved in anything online just had that like 20 screens set up and everything was green on black. No, doesn't look like that.
You just, and then you come off it. And I, like, back in the day when I did webinars, I think so sweet, early Teresa and early my husband, like back in the day, we'd all be there, we'd all be ready and waiting, like I'd be pumped up, like ready for the webinar. And then we'd get off and he'd be like, yay, he's celebrating with me. And now it's like, oh yeah, I got a webinar on Thursday, and he just doesn't even think about it. Like, he won't even remember I've got one, because I'll do it while he's not here, and then I'll come off and make dinner. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's as sexy as it's going to get. But, when you know that, that's fine. That's good. Like, I love my business.
You're just keeping an eye on the time because you've got like Domino's delivery schedule to come 10 minutes after Yeah, 10 minutes after the knock off the
That's
webinar.
the end of the Q&A. Let's
Yep,
go.
I'm up.
Got a pizza
But-
coming. I love it.
so obviously, like most webinars, you're looking at they tend to run to about 60 to 90 minutes. I've
Mhm.
seen. I don't know if that's still the case, if there's any kind of shifting trends on that, but either way you cut it, a webinar is longer form content than most
Yeah.
of what people will be putting out. That's a long time to get people engaged. Do you have any little tips, tricks, techniques that you use to increase the chance that someone will stick around to
Mhm.
the latter part of the webinar when we're going to start talking a bit more about how we can help them
Yeah.
and stuff like that?
And that is, just to be clear, that is the point where you really overtly sell, even though you're
Mhm.
selling all the way through. That is the point. So I have 3 stages of the webinar, which is the setup, the getting started, which is I call it setting the scene. So in that part, it's about 15 minutes, and it's kind of doing the housekeeping. It's doing the whole, you're in the right place if you're not in the right place if. It's kind of getting the stage set, and then we have delivering the content, which is where you add the value, and then you have giving the offer, which is the sales bit. So
Mm.
and so like you said, you want them to stay to the end. So a couple of things is, one, you give them a reason to stay to the end,
Mm.
and that reason is, here is a bonus that when you stay till the end of the webinar you will get it. And it's so blatant and it's so obvious and it's so simple, but it works.
Yeah.
um Two, you keep them engaged. So there's some psychology behind this as well, about herd mentality, that when other people see other people doing it, they're more likely to do the whole, like, oh yeah, I'll respond, I'll get involved, which means they're much more involved in the webinar. So have you
Mm.
ever seen on, and this is like old school stuff, which is horrible, but back in the day, there used to be the whole run to the back of the room, get your
Oh,
credit
yeah.
card out. Horrible.
Yeah.
But there would be plants, right? And the reason there'd be plants is because suddenly you'd think, oh God, they're doing it, I've got to do it too.
Mm.
Um, and people do that on webinars now, in terms of, like, they'll get to the end and someone will go, I've bought, and then suddenly you're watching, I bought, because, and then suddenly you're like, I was watching a webinar, I was never going to buy the thing because I was just watching the webinar for webinar's sake, and I was like, oh, maybe I should go buy it. It works. But that might be too far. And
Mm.
also, if you've got a small audience, you might not get people buying on the webinar. We try to, but you might not. So it's little things like, when I ask them, I use the whole thing of, you're in the right place if this is how you feel, if you're struggling with this. And normally I do about 6 points, six
Mm.
pain points. And then at the end, I show them all on a screen. And I always say to them, you tell me which of these resonate the most while I drink some water. Right. And
Mm.
I end up drinking some water and, like, take a minute while they tell me. So again, you're getting them in the habit of getting engaged and being part of that thing. The other thing I really promote is, I don't answer questions until the end.
Mhm.
So I say to them, and also they're on screen. I used to do webinars via a webinar system, so I couldn't see them. The last few I've done on screen with them, just in Zoom as a meeting, just
Mm.
more out of my own preference than a strategy. I just like seeing faces. And
Mm.
also, one of the things I like when people ask questions is, I like getting details. So I find it
Mm.
much easier to ask them. So, but one of the things I will do is, I will say to them, I'm not answering questions while I go along. And I make some joke, which is serious, about, literally, there's like a dog with a fluffy tail and my brain's gone and I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. We will keep these questions, but I urge you to ask questions, because this is why you're on a live webinar, because you get to pick my brain for free. So little things like that, getting them to engage, going throughout, tell them there's a reason, stay to the end, get them to get their questions answered,
Mm.
all of those things. You are going to get drop-offs, but in my, I have to say, my own experience, I get very few drop-offs on a webinar. If you are getting loads, I'd be looking at your content that you're delivering. Like,
Mm.
normally at the point where you start selling, that's where you will naturally get drop-offs, and that makes sense. But they're never going to buy from you, and that's fine. And you're always going to have, and going back to those percentages, a very small percent are actually going to buy from you. So
Mm.
don't worry too much about that. But I think some of those little things can really help people stay to the end.
Definitely. And yeah, some of those techniques I've used myself as well. They stick around to the end to get this bonus that we've talked
Yeah,
about. And yeah, like people know what that is,
of
but
course.
also they are there. It's remembering no one's turning up for this webinar cynical. They are there knowing what
Yeah,
it is mostly, but also want to learn and they want to be engaged and they want a reason to stay. Because
Yeah. And if it's a good bonus and they want it, they will stay. If it's
exactly.
not very good, then they're not going to. And you're going to deliver the bonus. So we get our head in this thing of like, oh, this is a bit sleazy and a bit. And it's like, well, what actually is like sleazy or salesy about it? Because it's like, I've said, if you want this, you have to stay till the end. If you do, I'm going to give it you. So do you want it or not? Like, it's as simple as that.
Exactly. And yeah, it's for attending the webinar, not kind of showing up for a few minutes at the beginning and then disappearing. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So kind of the word sleazy's come up in terms of what people are kind of worried about, especially in the online space, because there's a lot of that we have to navigate through. Something that I know I've always really kind of been on the fence with and quite often on the side of thinking it's a little bit are automated webinars. What are your thoughts on pre-recorded or hybrid webinars? Is there a place for them? If so, where's that place? And how do you make them non-sleazy? How do you make them engaging and authentic? Or do they just not convert?
It's a great question. And so the first thing I'll say is people want to go to that straight away, right? They'll come to me and go, I just want to do it evergreen. And it's like, no, you can't, right? Well, you can, but your results aren't going to be great. So even before you think of evergreening anything, I want you to do live webinars because you need to hone how you do it. You need to see what people are engaging with, what they're not engaging with. You need to know it's actually working before you do anything else. My thing with evergreen webinars and having them kind of on an auto thing is be very honest, right? So when they try and pretend, it's that really gets my goat. And like, put in the chat where you're from. Well, you're not even there. Like, why in the chat where you're from? Like, treat it as for me, I would much rather say it's like an on-demand training or it's an on-demand webinar. You could do things like, hey, listen, I'm not here live because I know what it's like. It's not always easy to get here live. That's why I've put this thing on demand or on evergreen. You can DM me or just don't ask for that interaction. So I do think they do work. The percentage is considerably lower and you are going to have a lot of people go through that. And you're going to have to, this is where, and I toy a bit on this is where you have to use some more of those tactics in terms of like a short window of like you've got literally in the next half an hour, you get it for this price and then the price goes up. The more of a reason to take action because they don't have that urgency when they know it's an evergreen webinar. So it's that whole thing of, okay, it is on demand and on this webinar at this point, you're going to get it for this. You need the tech to back you up on that because the last thing, and I would seriously recommend you don't do that if you can't get the tech to back it up. Because if someone goes, you're only going to get it for this, and then you can get it for that because it doesn't go anywhere, then they're never going to believe you. If someone's smart enough, they'll just go back through the evergreen webinar and get it again. But I think you do need to maybe give more in bonuses. You need to give more of a deadline. You need to give more urgency because there's no urgency on an evergreen webinar. But I do think, in fact, one of the last times I interviewed, so I did a summit last year and you were at the summit, which was awesome. And I interviewed Amy Porterfield and her aim this year is to earn as much from her evergreen as she does from her live. So she does a live launch every year, just one, which I said when I interviewed her terrifies the hell out of me. And she's like, I know, me too. So she does one live launch each year, which is of her digital course academy. And she has an evergreen funnel of her List Builder Society. And her aim was to earn as much through that as she does through the big launch. She will be chucking some massive numbers through that. Like you are like when someone does something evergreen. In fact, I literally just dealt with a client before I got on this call who's doing basically it's a add to a lead magnet, then email number 3 offers like a really low cost item. No one's bought it, but she's only had 100 people come through it. So it's like, that doesn't surprise me. So the only thing with evergreen is you've constantly got to be pouring people in the top of that funnel and a lot because your percentages are going to be way lower. But I
Yeah.
think if you're going to do it, I don't think it's a terrible strategy. I just think be honest. Just don't make
Mm.
out like you're there live, or don't make out like, and also I probably wouldn't use a pre-recorded webinar. I would
Mm.
probably record something
Alive.
specifically and go,
Oh,
here's
okay.
like, as in, so if I did a webinar, the problem is I'm going to be, hi, where are you from? Da da da. Like all of that stuff. I don't want any of that on it.
Yeah.
I would go to camera and go, hi, here's a a webinar, evergreen. Glad you could join me. Like I would probably be really blatantly honest about that.
Yeah, I think as well, like some of the tools that the webinar software give you to emulate live,
Mm,
you can see why people get tempted into it. But
yeah,
yeah, I think that's a very slippery slope. And I do think audiences are just a little savvier. Obviously, it's going to be
yeah,
different from market to market, but pretty much guaranteed on every live webinar I've done over the last year or so, at some point, someone has either said, "Oh, this isn't live, is it?" Or they've said, they've said, "Are you actually there, or is this pre-recorded?" And I've had like, "No,
brilliant.
no, I'm literally right here," um,
Yeah,
because it's
because we're not very
become,
trusting.
yeah, people aren't so trusting, and they've probably been on 2 or 3 webinars before where they've asked a question and no one's acknowledged it, and then
Yeah,
they cotton on to the fact that this is actually like 3 years old. But
yeah,
no, I think
yeah.
that transparency, especially I think with a membership site where you're not just looking to make a one-off sale. Like
Hmm.
this isn't a
Totally.
run and gun kind of thing. You've
Nope.
got to have to start off on a basis of trust and transparency and
Yeah.
effort.
Yeah. And there's still, given how tech is and how amazing it is, there's still things that you could do to engage with someone when you do an evergreen. So there's
Mm,
nothing to say that you couldn't do like a bonjoro, or,
mm,
there's nothing to say that you couldn't do something that says, come and DM me, or you could still encourage that. But I just think, again, I was watching one that, by the way, you were saying about timing. So for me, 60 minutes to an hour and a half is plenty.
mm.
Um, I tend to stick around the 60 minutes and then go over with Q&A is ordinarily how I do it. But I was watching one, and I won't say who it was with. I'll tell you after we stop recording. But basically, it was a huge person. It was almost a 3-hour webinar, right? It was pretending to be live, but it wasn't.
Wow.
And it was like, oh my God, don't leave the room if you're in because we're maxed out. And if you leave the room, you're not getting back in again. And it was like this chat was coming in, and it's like you would put a question, or I would put something in just to see, and obviously nothing would happen. And it was just absolute nightmare. And it was 3 hours, right? And to the point where I couldn't get off because I was so like, when are you actually going to tell me something?
Yeah.
It was literally 3 hours of selling that I was like, this is so painful, but I almost can't come away because I'm waiting on the bit where you actually give me some content. It
Mhm.
was ridiculous, ridiculous.
Yeah, I've seen one 4 to 5 hours that have been live. That
Oh my
was
God.
semi-webinar structured, but it was also just a series of bringing on kind of case studies, which are great.
Yeah.
We've established case studies are great,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
by the time
But
you're at hour 4, you're not really respecting your audience's time.
no, no. And can I just say one more thing as well with the longer webinars? And there's something that is I've just done recently a couple of times and is quite effective, is paid webinars. And if
Okay.
you're going to do a paid webinar, it does need to be different, because
Mm.
if I'm doing something paid, I need, if I'm buying something, I want real content, right? And I'm not
Mhm.
saying I don't give real content on a webinar, or that you shouldn't give real content, but you do skim the surface. So for instance, I'm going to talk about 3 bits of launching that doesn't go so well, or that
Yeah.
people should improve. What I'm not going to do is dive fully into the one and tell them how to do it.
Mm.
When you're doing a paid workshop or webinar or masterclass or whatever you want to call it, they tend to be quite low cost, but it's quite nice because you're only getting people sign up that are really invested to do the thing. So the
Mm.
last one I did, weirdly enough, was about webinars. It sounds very meta, but it was actually a workshop, and it
I
was
mean,
over
I run a membership about memberships. We're talking
memberships. Yeah.
about it.
We live in meta. But like, so it was actually over a couple of days I ran the workshop. Instead of doing like a 3 or 4 hour one, I decided to do like 1 hour over a few days.
Mm.
It was £47, and I basically taught them what to do when on the webinar, right? So I didn't teach them the run up, I didn't teach them the afterward, I didn't teach them the sales page, I didn't teach them how to build their audience. I basically said, from the moment you turn on your camera to the moment you turn it off, this is what you say and when. And I gave them everything, right? And so obviously the first thing that was great is my perfect audience are someone who wants to launch, and therefore if you want to do a webinar, you want to launch. So one, I'm only attracting the right people. Two, I'm attracting people who are serious, because you wouldn't pay money if you weren't. You're not just coming along, let's see what Teresa's doing. You are going, okay, I want to know. Three, I'm giving them real actual stuff. I even did things like gave them emails on how to get people to turn up live. I gave them a presentation template with each slide, telling them what to put on each slide. Like I broke everything down as much as I possibly could for them. And I went deep on that one thing. And then this was so funny, because I wasn't actually going to sell my new course at the end of it, because the new course wasn't ready. I'd got nothing, no sales page, the course wasn't even built. I knew what was going into it, but I got to the end. I'd had such a good time. I thought, you know what, I am going to sell. And I said to them really openly, I wasn't going to, but I am. And I'm going to explain to you what's coming. It's not ready. You're obviously going to get it much cheaper, because I have nothing ready until next year. This was December. Obviously January came. I did a 25% conversion.
Wow.
Like, it was
For an
nuts.
impromptu sales.
Nuts, right?
Wow.
No sales calls, no nothing. In fact, I sent 3 emails. I said to them, I'm only going to send you 3 emails. I had a group. It was a Telegram group where the chat was going on. So it could be any group, where obviously I was in between the workshop calls, I was looking at stuff and reviewing stuff. But because the main and only reason I can put this down to is I went so deep and I showed them how I work. And here is everything. Like, I am not leaving you in the dirt to try and work this out. I am literally telling you everything. And if I did that for this thing here, all the other things, that's how I'm going to be. So they knew, they got a real taste of like, actually, this is how she works. This is what she's doing. And they were smaller numbers, because again, if I had just done a normal webinar as opposed to a paid workshop, my numbers would have been higher on a webinar, but my conversion was way higher. So you're getting less in the first instance, but I was getting more out at the other end. And it was brilliant. And I loved it. And it felt really good, because it wasn't, I didn't feel like you weren't getting anything. They were really getting something, but I would never do that as a free. I would only ever do that as a paid. And that I just chose to do it over a few days. You could do it. I've done it previously on a 3-hour workshop as well. So paid for 45, 47, whatever it might be, go deep, give them the stuff they need. But as we all know, that's one part of a massive piece of the puzzle.
I mean, you can already see kind of the scope for doing something like that to lead into, a £45, $45 a month membership. Like, you could be delivering that sort of thing to your members for free as part of their membership, and then you sell it at the same price point your membership is per month, and include a free month of your membership with it for the non-members who buy in. Like, lots of scope.
And I love that. I love the people. I did have a few people who got it for free, like that work one-to-one with me. But I love the fact of going, members, here's a thing for you, and you can buy into it. Because the other thing that, of course, you get is that social proof, because that room is full of your members. And most memberships, and I've certainly had this, and I know you've had this, they will say nice things about you, because they wouldn't be in your membership if they didn't love you. So
exactly.
It's a great strategy. And either way, you're getting paid. And yes, you're not getting loads of money, but you are getting some money. And if that kind of covers, the effort of going to it, then brilliant. But the chances are you'll convert really well, because they've spent time with you, they know you, they love you, and then they want to do more.
And if your offer can essentially be, you've already paid $45, the membership's $45. So what you paid for the workshop, that covers your first month here as a member, and then after that it'll kick in at $45 a month. Like,
exactly.
I've got a feeling this could kick off a whole another hour of talking about
not even kidding
workshops. And so
I've dropped that in right at the end. Like, there we go. Sorry.
Right. So, I think a good place to wrap up. If there's any kind of one, I know there's no magic bullets, but if there's one thing that is your go-to for your own webinars for clients? It's kind of the first thing. If you're reviewing someone else's webinars and you see they're not doing it, you're like, ooh, good. I can move the needle on here. Something we've maybe not talked about already. What would that be? What would be your final golden nugget about using webinars?
Setting the stage in terms of why they're there and then reminding them. I see this where, so basically at the beginning you say you are here because pain point, pain point, pain point, pain point, pain point. And then at the end, before you move into the sale, the real sales part, remind them, you came here today because you felt like this, because you had this thing, because you struggled with this, because you weren't. We need to remind them that is still a problem, and then we can move into the sales bit. So those are the things I see that people miss. We need to, I know people don't like talking about pain points, but we need to remind them why they're there, and there's a good reason they're there. So for me, if they haven't got that, it's like, oh no, come on, this is like basic.
I like that. No, I like that because I think, especially for someone who might still be feeling that little bit iffy about getting into the sales thing, there's almost the right. We'll just kind of rush into that. Let's find a way to segue smoothly without circling back to the stuff you started with. So no, that is a real good tip. And of course, if you want to find out more about how you can effectively utilize webinars as part of your membership marketing strategy, there is one room you need to be in this year. That is at Retain Live 2025 in my hometown of Newcastle, September 22nd to 24th, where you will learn even more from the fantastic Teresa and all of our other great speakers. It's going to be here before we know it. That is nuts.
It's going to be ace.
Yeah.
So exciting.
I can't wait. I'm really, really excited. And yeah, I'm going to be nailing you down to talk about paid workshops and webinars at various points as well. Yeah. Cool.
Awesome.
Right at the end. Love that. All right. Teresa, thank you so much for joining me on today's show. If someone wants to know more from you, get more of your stuff, even take part in the webinar you've been talking about that is coming up, where can they connect with you?
If you head to Instagram, that's my favorite. Come and find me at Teresa Heath-Wareing, and go to teresaheathwareing.com and you can find everything there.
Awesome. And of course, we'll pop all the links and all that good stuff in our show notes. Teresa Heath-Wareing, thank you so much for being on the Membership Geeks podcast and sharing all of your webinar wisdom.
Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Just want to say a big thanks once again to Teresa for joining me on the show and for sharing so much wisdom and value. Already on the back of that interview, I've started making little tweaks and changes to the webinars that we've been doing, and I'm seeing results. And these are just minor changes. I haven't even gone all in on some of the strategies and tactics that Teresa shared, and it's already paying dividends. So if you have been using webinars to promote your membership, or if you're thinking about incorporating them into your strategy, make sure you implement the tips and tactics Teresa has shared. And if you want more from Teresa, she will be on the stage at Retain Live 2025 this September 22nd to the 24th in my hometown of Newcastle upon Tyne, sharing more of her marketing wisdom. If you are serious about growing your membership in 2025 and beyond, that is the room you need to be in. Head on over to retainlive.com for more information, for the schedule, for details of who else we have on the incredible lineup of speakers at the only conference in the world dedicated to the growth of successful online memberships. All right, that is it from me. Thanks again to Teresa for a fantastic episode. I'll be back again next time with another installment of the Membership Geeks podcast. Bye for now. If you enjoyed this week's episode of the Membership Geeks podcast, we invite you to check out membershipacademy.com. Membership Academy is the original membership about memberships, and it's the essential resource for anyone at any stage of starting, growing, and running a successful online membership business. Whether you're still trying to figure out what your idea is going to be and you need some help making it a reality, or whether your website is already up and running and you're looking for ways to grow and attract new members, then Membership Academy can help you to get to the next level. Not only do you get access to our step-by-step membership roadmap, our extensive training library, and exclusive member-only discount and tools, you'll also become part of our supportive, active community of membership owners that will help you along the way in your journey with feedback, encouragement, and advice. All of this and more make Membership Academy the number one place to be for anyone looking to start, manage, and grow a successful membership business. Check it out and join the community at membershipacademy.com.